take a moment to introduce HdK. We're a digital marketing agency, and we have been working mainly in the arts section, but in the arts sector, but we also work outside of the arts and work from clients in the food industry, in the health industry, in construction industry, law industry as well. So we're bringing a bit of all of that experience into today's talk. I'm just going to let a few more people into the room as well. And today's topic is top tips for newsletter success. I really like this topic. It's I remember sending out an email campaign, my first email campaign back in the sort of the late 90s, at a time when people really didn't have email addresses. So I think we focused on students. So we did a freshers campaign to collect email addresses and then run a campaign on the back of that until we realized that's great for the sort of immediate email campaigns, but because people were giving their university and college email addresses, we didn't really have a long life with those people. Anyway, things have moved on a long way since then, and I'm glad to see that email marketing is still here despite threats. I think there are times when we thought there's so much spam that email marketing will die. When social media came about, we thought this would be the end of email marketing, and it's definitely still here today. There are about 4 billion email users in the world at the moment, and they're sending out, or together companies and private emails, we're sending about 300 billion emails every day, which is an enormous figure. And yeah, I mentioned spam, and clearly that's something that we think, well, will newsletter email marketing work? But there are stats that suggest that for every £1 marketing spends on email campaigns, we get a return of £42. So it's definitely something that is worthwhile investing some time and some experiencing. So many of you who have joined our webinar before will already know my colleague Freya, who's our marketing coordinator, and she runs email campaigns for some of our clients and HdK as well. But many of you may not be familiar, unless you're working with Claire on other projects, who's not done a webinar with us before. So this is her first. She joined HdK in September and is our project coordinator and developer. But she also is drawing on today her experience working in another agency before us, and also working on our clients where we're integrating email signups and systems like Mautic, and that automates emails as well. So they'll be sharing you some top tips later on. Before we do that, I just want to remind you that we really do encourage interaction. So if you've got some questions at any point, put them in the chat box and we will try and respond to them either straight away or we'll wait for an appropriate moment, but put it in the chat box while it's on your mind. And remember that if you're thinking of the question, there's chances are someone else might be thinking of it, and we'll really appreciate you putting that in the chat box. So do that. We're going to try and keep this to 60 minutes, so I'm going to try and wrap up quickly, but we will leave about 10 minutes for questions and answers at the end, so do have those ready. As well. It's worth noting that we're recording the session today, so we'll put this on our blog. So if you miss anything, if you don't capture it in your own notes, or you want to go back something, or you just want to share it with a colleague or a friend, it'll be on the blog either by the end of today or by tomorrow. And just to kick us off, and as I said, I'll try and it's really helpful when we get interactions from you. Maybe you can share in the chat box now what you want to get out of the session, and we'll maybe read a few of those out, and we'll say if we are able to answer those in the session, or whether we'll pick them up in the Q&A session later. So please just put into the chat box now anything that you're hoping to get out of today. Give you a moment just to do that. While you do that, rather, let me just tell you what we're going to cover today. So the first bit, Claire's going to kick off, and she's going to talk about, she's going to provide information on what kinds of content you can include in your newsletters. And then Freya's going to pick up the baton. She's going to help you optimize your open rates and with subject lines and preview text. So, what's the point of creating all that content if people don't open up your emails? So she's going to give you some tips on that. And then Freya's going to finish off as well. She's going to carry on and discuss the best trends and best tried and tested methods for generating clicks. So we're always wanting people to action something as a result of sending out the emails. That's what we'll cover in that bit. So thank you for those who you are sharing what you're hoping to get out of today. Lots of practical tips from Camille and Sam saying top tips for subject lines and what does success look like on average. I think that's a really good question. So let's pick that up later. So without further ado, let me pass on to Claire.
Hi everyone, and Hans, thank you for the introduction. As mentioned, I'm going to be looking at the types of content that you can share in your mailing. So what I want to do is I want to bring it back and start off by looking at how to approach planning out your mailing itself, because this will inform the type of content that you'll need. So we'll be looking at a few steps that you'll want to take before going in and adding content to the body of your mailing itself. This analysis can then help inform and then structure your content decision. So one of the first items to look at and to start off with, we want to consider who is your audience, which is quite a general question, but have you divided them into different kinds of lists? Are these new subscribers? Are these existing subscribers? Can you segment them by their interests? Can you divide them into lists according to their engagement? And then what really is engagement, and how do you define that? So perhaps you remember Snow White, and if you remember the name of the characters in Snow White, you could try and segment your list by your happy subscribers who are loyal and engaged customers, or your sleepy subscribers who don't open your mailings, but they haven't unsubscribed from your mailing list. Or you could look at your bashful subscribers who might just need a little bit of a nudge before they convert into customers. You'd want to work with each list separately in different campaigns. Say, for example, you could ask your happy customers or your happy subscribers for reviews. You could ask your sleepy subscribers to, participate in a poll, or you could send them an offer to entice them and to encourage engagement with you. Maybe you can also tell us in the comments at this point how you segmented your own audience, or conversely, what's prevented you from doing this. Maybe you've got a lack of data, or you don't quite know how to segment them that will actually work to your benefit. Then next, we want to look at success. What would look like success for you, for your mailing campaign? What do you want to achieve in the mailing campaign? That's going to really give your content a clear focus and a goal that you can achieve. Make sure that your content always drives you to that goal. So did you want people to, say, for example, look at a trailer that you've created? Do you want people to sign up to an event that you're hosting? Do you want to get more followers on social media? Or are you trying to re-engage your sleepy subscribers through these polls and giveaways? Or are you trying to potentially thank your loyal, happy subscribers for purchasing from you or supporting you during the course of 2020? You also need to kind of think about whether this is going to be a one-off campaign or part of an ongoing push with different kinds of phases. Think about what you want to achieve at the end of that push. And then once you've settled on a goal, stick to it and keep it in focus, keep it in mind the whole time. Let's look at a slide that I've created so you can take some notes or screenshots if you'd like to use this approach in your next mailing. So the third item that I've got down there is keeping your content inspired, useful, and to the point. Can you invoke emotion from your use of images and copy? Or are you giving your subscribers the ability to solve a problem or some practical advice? Keep whatever you have short. Keep a hierarchy in your email, in your mailing composition, so that your subscriber doesn't need to scroll down to see the message that you want them to see, especially if they're on mobile. So you'd want to do this by limiting your content blocks to 3 to 5 blocks, and always making sure that you treat your subscribers like VIPs. So be cognizant of their time and make sure that your images and offerings are top quality always. The next point I've got is to research. So you want to look at what you've done before, whether it worked, what did work, where you received clicks, where you received the most openings. If you use that data and then also segment your list and also have clear and confident goals for your emails, your subscribers are bound to feel more engaged with your offering. Obviously, you want to keep track of engagement, subscriber engagement with your mailings after you've sent out your campaign, and then take it back, redefine your subscribers again, look at whether your predictions were correct, and then repeat the cycle. In addition, and we touched on this before, you want to have a standard hierarchy so that your content helps your subscribers, standard hierarchy to your content, which will help your subscribers read and digest your content more easily. So if they know where to look, then you're making their task of understanding and absorbing your information easier. Keep your primary message at the top of your email so that it makes the most impact. It's not lost to viewers who, again, don't scroll down. So we'll go through the hierarchy in the slide, and then we'll look at some popular examples of content. So we're looking at subject, preview and text, which Freya will touch on, your logo, your brand colors, introduction blurb, on-brand imagery, high-quality imagery, call to actions and links, then your contact information, your social media, and your footer. So if we go back to some popular examples of content that people use within their mailings, we can look at announcements and how-to guides, roundup of activity, personal insights and expert advice, exclusive offers or unseen content, your latest blog posts, top tips and interesting facts. You could add in a joke or a meme, but use with caution if you've got an odd sense of humor. Special offers from another business, an exclusive if possible, customer testimonials or reviews. That links in with asking your happy subscribers to provide those reviews for you. Or you could look at an interesting blog post from another website, which has the added benefit of giving a positive vibe, a positive message to your email that shows your audience that you're not just interested in selling to them, you also want to share information with them. You could look at advertising your next event, of course, but you could also bring it back and introduce a new team member, show some behind the scenes imagery and footage, or give responses on, say, for example, a charity fundraising total. Being perceived as spam from your content is generally a result of emails that haven't been tested or have been poorly tested. So one of the things to point out is that if you use, say, for example, a solid image in your mailing, you'll lose adaptability, which means that when somebody looks at your email on their mobile phone, for example, if the image will be constrained by the size of the screen, your text might not be legible, and if your subscriber has disabled images with their email client, they won't see the content at all. So there's a high probability of being blocked by the spam filter of the mail provider. So when creating and running mailings, be careful, send through a test database, and that's the way that you can make sure that you weed out all those potential errors before you send out your mailing. Now let's move on to a checklist that you might want to go through before you press send. So this checklist is learning from people who've made mistakes, because we've all made mistakes. And this checklist covers some of the big whoppers that some companies have fallen prey to without naming and shaming them, because we're kind. So first item, your list. Is your content actually in the interest of your subscribers? This is the easiest way to get unsubscribed. Look at your list and the data that you've got available for them, and make sure you're treating your subscribers' inboxes with respect. Triple check who the mailing is going to go to. You don't want to make a mistake and send the material to your wrong segment, to the incorrect segment, which might cause them to doubt whether subscribing to your mailings is in their best interests, whether your content is really right for them. The content itself, keep your copy to a bare minimum. This has become more and more the norm as years have gone by. Make sure that the copy that you have is as high quality as your images, and cross-check that with your friends and with your colleagues to make sure you're not using language that could be inappropriate to a social, economical, or political event. This has happened to people in the past, especially when, say, for example, you're reusing a previous campaign. Make sure that you're not using language that whereas the intention hasn't changed, the way that it might be read has now changed. So make sure that also your humor hits the mark. The idea is that you'll want the subscriber to be so fascinated by your email that they'll click through to your website to continue that journey. Going on to typo and tone, we all make mistakes, but when it comes to mailing campaigns, as receivers and subscribers, we expect that these have been weeded out. So it does tend to look unprofessional and distract from all the work that you've put into your mailing when we see typos in this context. Always ask for a fresh pair of eyes to go over your copy for typos as well as tone of voice. Your links should be an easy one, but if you miss them, your subscribers will be very frustrated with your email that you sent out to them. Making sure that your links work, making sure that they're correct, and making sure that wherever they link to has been properly set up is absolutely imperative. Yeah, you don't want to, again, you can ask colleagues to test this, but you don't want to, say, for example, set out a big announcement, link through to your website, and then nothing happens when you try and follow that link. Personalization. If you're going to have your subscriber's name in your database and then pull that through into your mailing, make sure it's been entered correctly. If your data is not in order, if names start with lowercase or there's an obvious spelling error or something like that, or say, for example, if they don't have a name in your database, but you haven't catered for that in your test, your subscribers might feel a bit lost and your personalization attempts might come across entirely opposite to how you intended. That can really create a sense of alienation for your subscriber. Personalization, though, can win you a lot of loyalty. So if you don't have that personal information, go to step 6, which is timing. Timing can also get you loyalty. You could try send out emails just after an event. You can make sure that your attendees feel really special. You can find different ways to engage with your subscribers to have a more reactive approach to communicating with them. This starts to become more conversational. It starts to feel more engaged from your subscribers' perspective. And this could facilitate that little nudge to be able to turn your bashful subscribers onto your customer list.
Claire, that was really, really helpful, and it's really good to see how you kind of can develop the content from your email, from being looking at what kind of content's popular, but then also this checklist, which is so helpful, because I know it can feel really nerve-wracking before you're about to send out a big email. So these are like really great checklists to kind of look at and make sure that all your content is right.
I definitely remember sending out emails to lists of tens of thousands, and that feeling you get. So checklist, I think, would have been really helpful for me then as well.
Definitely. So I'm now we've kind of looked at the content and how you can develop the content of your email. I'm going to explore how you can optimize your subject and preview text. So before I kind of go into this section, if you could just maybe either add in the comments, or if you want to should say over your speaker. What do you think are the best things to include in a subject line to get people to open your newsletter? So I'm just going to quickly get the comments on so I can see if anyone's typing anything. But here is kind of some examples. Emojis, yeah, that's a great example. Special offers. Great. Yeah, this is kind of just a screenshot from my my phone, which something really targeted, something for free. These are all really great suggestions. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, so this is kind of just a screenshot from my phone of the emails that I've kind of received recently, just with from different companies, and you can see there that some of them include offers, some of them include things like emojis. So on average, the individual receives around 121 emails every day. So that can really make your audience's kind of inbox a bit of a battlefield for attention. So kind of really standing out from the crowd is so important. And whilst we kind of tend to focus on the content of our newsletter, sometimes it can feel that the subject line and the preview text are a slight afterthought. So you might kind of only come to them as you're kind of sending out your email, and you haven't really put a lot of thought or a thought process behind what you're including. So I'm just kind of going to go through some really top tips or what to include in a subject line and preview text, and what kind of makes a good subject line and preview text now. So some top tips to consider are your company style. So there are many ways to kind of approach your email subject lines, from short and sweet to personal to keyword specific and more. So determine kind of what suits you and your company's brand. And if you're not sure about this, or you're not sure about your audience preferences, then test. So testing can be a great way to try out different methods of content and to try out different subject lines. So split tests are really effective. So when you are carrying them out, just have a really clear hypothesis. So, something like, should we use emojis? Should we use questions or special offers? And then carry out those key tests and see what subject lines tend to have the best reaction or the best open rate from your audiences. Another thing to consider is length. So your subject line obviously has a really limited amount of time to get your audience's attention, and it really needs to kind of grab them and engage them in some way. So not only is it important that your subject line is kind of short and to the point, but it needs to be really snappy and kind of have something that kind of catches your audience's eye. Obviously now a lot of us are viewing our emails on mobile devices, so that kind of limits our space once again. So we would kind of say the optimum kind of number of characters to include in a subject line are between 17 and 24, and approximately around 3 to 5 words. The next kind of top tip is to be specific, and this sounds slightly vague as a top tip, but there are many ways that you can be specific with your subject lines. One of them is including a location. So if the content of your newsletter is kind of talking about an event that's taking place in a really specific location, then include that in your subject line, because it's more likely that your audiences are going to want to know about an event that's taking place near them. Think about who your content or your newsletter is aimed at. So be specific with your demographics in your subject line. Are you targeting a specific age group, a gender? Are you targeting a profession? So if you're kind of if you've got content that links to sales, are you contacting the sales advisors? So, highlight that in your subject line so you can really directly reach out to that audience. Segmentation. So it might be worth segmenting your audiences so that you can be more specific with those things in your subject lines. Be specific with a clear call to action. So if you've got, an event or something that you really want your audiences to click through to or participate in, include that call to action in your subject line. Be specific with keywords. So, really highlight the theme or the content of your newsletter and use those keywords. So, search engine optimization tells us that keywords are really important to include in blog post titles. So kind of, transfer that knowledge to your subject lines and include keywords so people can kind of understand what your newsletter is about. And also they can search for it again when they go back through their emails. If they kind of remember that you've touched on a topic that they're interested in, they can then find it again quickly. Mix it up. So, try and consider using things like statistics or emojis. And I know a couple of people mentioned that just then in the chat. So, stand out from the crowd. And people have found that including numbers in a subject line, result in higher open rates. And plus, it has been found that brands that use emojis have a 56% increase on their unique open rates. So, it's really important to trial that out and see if that works for you and your audiences. Again, just, remember to keep in mind your branding and make sure that those emojis that you use are really relevant to your brand and reflective of it. So you don't want to use anything that's out of character, but something that's still super relevant to you, but it might be just a nice way to kind of grab your audience's attention. A thing to kind of avoid when you're writing your subject lines are things like spammy language or special characters or capitals. So check your subject lines before you send them out, and just make sure that you kind of aren't using anything like low discount or low price or apply now, as they tend to kind of be considered as spam language, and that might kind of deter people from opening your email. In addition, overuse of things like statistics or emojis can sometimes be off-putting. So, maybe using one emoji, that would be enough for a subject line, considering that the characters, you don't have that many characters to use. So I'm now just going to quickly show a quick checklist. So here we are. So here's just some key points that you can take away. So when you go to write your emails and you're kind of checking your subject line, just think about the length. Is it an optimum length? Is it concise? Is it short and snappy? Have you included keywords? Is it obvious what your newsletter is talking about? Have you avoided any kind of special characters, capitals, or a language that may be considered to be spammy? And have you been specific in some way? So whether that's by using those keywords that you've been specific, or have you, called on your audience in some way with a call to action, or have you kind of been audience specific by, really directly reaching out to a certain demographic? So the next section, not that one, I'm going to stop sharing my slides, sorry. So the next kind of point to look at is from your subject line is your preview text. So don't forget your preview text. Whilst this isn't technically, a part of your subject line, this is something that your audience is going to see straight after your subject line. So it really definitely still deserves your attention and a bit of thought behind it too. So some key points to consider are making sure that your preview text works with the subject line. So it keeps the same tone, it keeps the same branding style. The preview text should kind of let your audiences know the content of your email and the value of your newsletter. So basically why they should open it. Kind of view your preview text in some ways as a backup to your subject line. So your subject line has got your audience's attention, and now you're kind of backing that up with any extra information, any extra content that you can provide. And again, it's really important to still keep them really concise and punchy. So don't, have a really long preview text as it will kind of just trail off. Again, keep it really concise and short so that the audience can understand your messaging and understand whether it's an email that they want to open. So that kind of explores all of the kind of preview text and subject line tips. So now I'm going to move on to how to get more clicks. So
wow.
just before I go on to this section, it'd be really great to know if you have any what you're kind of linking to in your emails at the moment. So do you link to social media platforms? Do you link to, you know, other websites? Are you linking to your website? Are you linking to a blog channel? So it'd be good to know what kind of people are using their newsletters for to link to at the moment. I'm just so whilst they're social media, that's good to know. So yeah, I'll let blogs, resources, social media, emails, YouTube channel, website, social media. Okay. Obviously now I'm kind of assuming that we've had a really great subject line. You've got really great preview text. People are on your email. So what you want them to do now is interact with your content and hopefully click on some links and really engage with what you have written. So there are two kind of really important things to consider here, and that's your design and your content. So first we're going to look at your design. So to help encourage engagement and clicks with your emails, design is really key. Obviously, you want your email to really flow naturally. You want it to be really clear and for your information to be really easy to scan through and to quickly read. Obviously, people are kind of pushed for time. There's, you know, an overload of content. So you want your email to be really quick to scan, read, and so they can pull out any key messages or points of interest to them. So having a really clear and simple design helps with this. Here are kind of our top tips for having that design that kind of helps to increase the engagement. So one thing you can do is use the images and have images as a central part of your email or animations. So here I've kind of got an example from the South Bank Centre, and you can see how the email looked on my desktop and then also how it looked on my mobile device. So here you can see that images are really central, and at the top that was a moving graphic. So as soon as I kind of clicked onto the email, that's really eye-catching and you know, gets your audience's attentions. The other thing to think about is having clear and single call to action. So here you can see you've got the read now buttons, which is a really simple, clear way to show links in your emails and to encourage people to click them to find out more information. You should also really check that your design works on different devices. So here I kind of wanted to show how that design is then reflected on a mobile device, and you can see how it's optimized to kind of fit a mobile aesthetic. And that's really important to make sure that when you are testing your emails before you send them out, that you've opened them on different devices, because up to 60% of emails are now open on a mobile device, and 42.3% of consumers will delete an email if it's not optimized for a mobile. So it's really important to kind of make sure that your newsletter is. Other things that you should do is kind of add links to either images or to highlight the links in the text. So, you know, highlight in bold where you're going to add a link in, or, you know, when people hover over it, make sure it maybe changes color or something like that, just to make it really super clear where people can find out information, more information about what you're talking about in your newsletter. Another thing to consider is accessibility. So making sure your text is really easy to read and not having any kind of distracting backgrounds or any kind of, you know, loud images in the background that kind of distort the text. So making sure it's super clear so people can scan through and again, just really pick out those key bits of information that they want to find out more about. The next kind of point to consider is content. So content is really important, obviously, because if people are interested in the content that you're talking about in your newsletter, they're more likely to engage with it. And it's found that only 14% of email subscribers feel that the majority of their emails they receive are relevant to them. So that's a really small amount of people feeling like their emails are relevant. So making sure that your content that you're providing is really relevant and provides some value to your audiences can be a great way to encourage that, you know, click rate and to encourage people to engage with the content that you're providing. Keeping your emails concise and short and providing links to more information is another way that you can kind of generate more clicks and engagement. So again, talking about, you know, having things that are really brief summaries of topics or events that you might be mentioning in your newsletter, and then providing a link for those who want to read more. Because, you know, if you click on an email and you see that it's, you know, incredibly long, you're going to, you know, lose engagement pretty quickly, and you're going to think, I haven't got time to read through this, and you're probably not going to go back to it. Using easy to read, simple language, and avoid things like jargon. So again, just making sure that all the information is really clear and scannable, so audiences can pick out that key information and then click on those links that you've provided to find out more. And then structure, so including things like subheadings or titles, so that audiences can again scan through and then pick out which topic they want to maybe delve into a bit more. And then, as we mentioned before, having things like social media buttons are another great way to kind of encourage engagement on your newsletters and lead your audiences to other platforms where you have more content for them to enjoy. So that's, yeah, the end of my sections now. So I'm going to pass back on to Hans, who's going to lead a question section. So if you do have any questions, now's the kind of time to bring them up.
Thank you, Freya. I think there's some really interesting points. I think it was great to hear Claire's Snow White analogy. I love the idea of segmenting your audience by sleepy and bashful and happy and all of that. So thank you for that. And Freya, I have never really thought about the preview text before. Obviously, I'm aware of it. I see it come up, but I've not really thought about how you can sort of control it. So that was really useful for me. And also, I think your point about relevance, I think is the heart of all of this. Really, it's about the more relevant, the more targeted we can make our campaigns. Ultimately, the more results we're going to get. So thank you for those points. As Freya said, now is a good time for us to answer some questions. But equally, you know, you can switch yourself off mute if you want to join in and ask a question, or you want to answer somebody else's question. Please feel free. It looks like Sally has, can you use something a bit silly as well, like a nice recipe, or is that a bit off brand? And that's a great idea. What do people think about having something that's maybe not what you're selling, but just something that's related and sort of more about a hobby?
Yeah, I think that's a really nice idea. I think knowing that to your audiences that your emails are not just there to sell products, but you're actually interested in having that kind of like meaningful engagement with them and keeping them as, you know, a loyal customer and a loyal part of your audience is a great way to include things like that, you know, a nice recipe, or even just maybe like something to do with your company or your team. You might recommend, you know, some series that you've been watching or something like that, to just have that personal, more real feel to your newsletters that can have that really valuable engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's all about building relationships with your subscribers. And I think giving a little bit of yourself can work wonders, really. It's just a way to kind of look at a newsletter and remember that they're humans behind. And yeah, you're sharing information which is not you know, trying to entice them to buy something. You're sharing information to make their lives more interesting, or to, you know, or to give them something, you know, fun to do. And I think that's a great suggestion.
And I think that also ties in with marketing in general. Now we're away from sort of trying to hard sell all the time, and it's more about content and entertainment and engaging people. And we're not trying to get across our message all the time, but think about our users. And I think that taps into that as well. So yeah, thank you for that question. Rachel, you've got 2 questions, so thanks for sharing those. Your first question is, do you have any tips for stopping email going into spam?
I think one thing to consider is kind of what we touched on here is, you know, really being careful about what you're including in things like your subject line in your preview text, so that your newsletters don't kind of hit those kind of ideas of what spam might be. So, you know, just being really making sure that you're using language that doesn't fall into that spam category is one thing to really consider to help limit that chance of your emails going into spam.
Yeah, and I could also point out, you know, a topic that I touched on having, say, for example, a single image in your mailing, for example, with very limited copy, that does tend to highlight your mailing to different email clients or mail providers, inbuilt spam detection. So have a look at that. Make sure that you've got some quality copy in your mailing. If that's the case, that's definitely something to look at immediately. Sometimes things are just a little bit difficult in terms of bounces and spams, but it's also worth definitely checking on the list of tips that you might be able to find on you send your emails out through, and just go over their top tips, because they'll know at the heart of their clients' problems how to solve that.
Great, thank you for that. And Rachel also asks tips for increasing your newsletter subscribers. So she's tried 10% off to sign up, free resources, but still struggling where to place marketing budget to increase subscribers. I know that's a really tough thing to do. Has anyone got any tips or any tips that works for them on increasing your subscribers?
I know that with HdK, we do things like including the newsletter signups on the website, or mentioning them in other things like webinars or on social media. There are ways that you can maybe reach into new audiences. But I also think that social media could be a good place to start, and it might be that you kind of do it through more personal, client interaction. So, making sure that when you are speaking with clients, that you're mentioning that you have a newsletter, and that, that provides, some valuable content to them, so that when you are kind of publicizing your newsletter, you're explaining why they should subscribe to it. This is going to maybe have some top tips that could help you. So try and make it as kind of personal to who you're maybe selling your newsletter to, and just being really clear about what value that could be to them.
Yeah, and I could add that really, if you take a step back and look at your content, and look what you've done historically, and have a think about what you could do in the future, is there a way that you can offer your subscribers something that nobody else will be able to get? Say, for example, they'll know before anybody else when like a big event or a sale or a new release or something like that happens. How are you making sure that your newsletter subscribers are getting basically special attention, VIP attention, and maybe exclusive offers, maybe like a day before everybody else, whatever the case may be? Give it a reason to entice people to subscribe to you, because they're going to be ahead of the crowd and they're going to be in that VIP group. And then advertise that within your social media and on your website and wherever else. Make sure that they know what they're signing up for, and that and the benefits that they'll receive from that.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else want to add anything to that? Has anyone else had their own successes with building up subscriber lists that they want to share? Feel free to unmute yourself if you haven't. Well, there's some great questions. So yeah, if you do want to share, just put it in the chat as well if you prefer. Tiffany, you've asked, do you recommend sticking to a limited number of calls to action? That's a good question.
Yeah. I think that could tie into one of the points that I wanted to make too, and that Freya obviously also made as well, keeping your content short and concise. So if you're looking at 3 to 5 blocks of content, and by that we mean images and offerings, image and text offerings, 3 to 5 points that you want to make in that mailing, then you'll only really have 3 to 5 call to action, maximum. For example, 3 to 5 links. So if you have really clear focused goals in your content, then you're not going to risk really having excessive prompts for your subscribers to follow.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. Rachel, yeah, good question. What would you say counts as spammy language?
That's a really good question. And there are, if you kind of go onto Google, you can find really great lists that kind of list out a lot of language that you maybe not would even consider as kind of spammy. Things like apply now, or free or like 100% off. Those types of language or those types of characters kind of get associated with spam. So there's kind of a few different resources online. What I can do is when after the webinar, I'll add those links to those websites onto the webinar page on our website so that you can find them easily, or add them as a link on social media. But yeah, it kind of usually links to either having money off or applying for something. They're kind of the top ones that tend to be considered as spammy language, or things that include like special characters tend to also fall into that category.
Great, that sounds like a useful resource. Thanks, Freya. And Leanne, thank you. Social media links, is there a best place for these? Currently ours is in the email footer.
I think that as long as you, obviously if you're linking to something that's specific to do with your social media, and it's something that that's the main content of your email is talking about something that's happening on social media, then you're going to want to link to that in that section, probably near the top of your newsletter. But if you're just linking to it in general, then at the end, the email footer kind of feels like a natural place for people to go to there and to find out any more information, because if people have come all the way down to your email, it's likely that they're interested in your content and probably want to find more content that you're producing. So that would be a really great place to lead them to those social media platforms.
Right. Yeah. And Sally, thank you for your question. When you are touring, would there be a way to get a newsletter out to each audience of that theatre? And would that be a company's responsibility or the theatre's? You don't need to know the answer to this. Or would this be a job for the marketing agency? If it's a big tour, it's quite a job, really, yeah. So, Sally, we've got people here who've worked in theatres in this group amongst us. We've worked on tours as well, and I know Chloe works on tours. So maybe between us we can help you with that, with the answer to that. So shall I just go through it again? When you're touring, would there be a way of getting a newsletter out to each audience of that theatre? And would that be a company's responsibility or the theatre's? Well, I guess, first of all, it's going to be the theatres, because the data is going to belong to the theatre, really, isn't it? So if you're trying to access lists of people who've attended that theatre, it's going to be ticket buyers, and the only people who generally have access to that, unless the data has mutually been agreed that it can be shared with you from a previous time you've toured with them, it's going to be down to the theatre, and that's going to be something you're going to have to ask. Is that the right way to answer that question, guys?
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're looking to like specifically target an audience from a theatre audience who go to that venue, then it's likely that venue will have that information. You might have more kind of broad audiences who are just interested in the performance or the show that you're touring, but that might not be then linked to specific locations. So yeah, I would say definitely the theatre.
And I can see Kevin's also responded to your question, which further down as well, and Chloe as well. So some great expertise amongst us here. So thank you for your input there, guys. Heidi, I think you've got the next question. So this is a good question, I think. What frequency would you recommend for sending newsletters so you don't overwhelm or irritate your customers? So I would jump in there and I would say it really does depend on, it's going to be different for different lists and different companies, and it really depends on the amount of quality content you've got. So there are definitely going to be, cinemas are giving a weekly listing. That's going to feel, a weekly listing feels right for cinemas because they've got, changing program all the time. If you're a client, if you've got only a couple of products that change, it's going to be hard to have something, if you're selling those, it's going to be hard to generate enough engaging content on a weekly basis, unless you focus on that sort of the content side of things rather than the content. And what I would say is you test these things out. So you look at the response rates, you see the how quickly people are dropping off, and then you see how you can adjust that by the frequency. That would be my gut reaction to that response. I don't know if anyone else has got anything to add.
Yeah, definitely. I completely agree. I think it's obviously all about the quality of your content. You know, if you're churning out loads of emails that have no quality or no real value, then, you know, just because you're sending out loads of emails doesn't really mean you're still going to get valuable engagement. So I think definitely being led with what feels right for your audiences and for your branding, and also being led by what content you have, or what, you know, quality content you have, is the best way to determine that number, and it will vary, like you say.
Yeah, and I think we can speak again about you know, taking it back to what subscribers you're sending this out to. Are you sending this out to a general mailing list? Or are you sending this out to people who are really customers of you? Or, you know, because the thing is that it, you know, newsletter by itself, an update of news, what's going on with you, that is quite general. So you could keep that quite infrequent if you don't have a lot of, you know, change of program and things like that. But you could send out in those breaks, you know, in between those newsletters, you could send out mailings to the different segments of your audience with much more tailored content. So less about thinking about how often do you send out the newsletter, send it out when you've got good content, but then sending out to your segments of audience, send it, you know, engage with them directly, one-on-one, about their specific interests or according to their level of engagement. And you know, prompt your sleepy list to get more active, or alternatively help them to follow the links to unsubscribe, because you don't want to waste your emails, which cost you money, you know, environmentally as well. If they're not engaging with that, you want to make sure that you're sending out quality content to people who want to receive it.
Great, fantastic. Thank you. So I think that sort of brings us to the end of the questions and answers. So thank you, guys. We really appreciate all of those questions. It really helps to bring these webinars not to life, but, you know, makes it interactive for us. So we really value those questions. So thank you very much. Let me just tell you about 2 more webinars that are coming up. So the next month is using analytics to improve your website performance. That one is going to be Yannick's first appearance in our webinar series, and him and Yannick and myself are going to run that one, and we're going to hopefully try and make it really interactive as well. But if you've got any thoughts on analytics or any questions immediately, and you want to put those into the subject box now, we can feed that into the webinar. But it'll be mainly around Google Analytics and what to get out of Google Analytics, but maybe we might hit on other tools like Hotjar as well. So that's going to be next month on the 10th of February. So you can sign up to that one with a link. The links are already in the chat room. Thank you, Claire, for posting those. And then the one in March is going to be how to monetize your website. Obviously, it's going to cover things that, you know, we all know about things that we can sell on websites. So it's putting content behind paywalls, for example, selling tickets, selling products, merchandise, donations, taking donations, all those sorts of things that we know. But we've helped a lot of clients during the COVID lockdown period monetize their sites when before they just had a brochure site. So we're going to try and bring some of that experience and learning into a webinar, talk about practical ways, the different ways we've approached the same sort of task. So that's going to be the one that we cover in March. So again, if you've got any things that you'd like us to cover in both of those topics, please put in the subject in the chat box now while you think, and we can feed that in while we're preparing those webinars. Just to remind you, we're going to get this webinar with the notes on we've got a new webinar section on our website. So we've pulled out the webinars from the blog posts so that you can see them all in one place and use it as a resource. So the future ones there will be up there, but also today's video from today's blog will be up there as well, so you can refer back to it whenever you want, or share it with a friend. So just remains for me to say thank you again for joining us today. Thank you to Claire for our first webinar here at HdK. Thank you again, Freya. Always good work. Thank you. And thank you everyone else for joining us. And I hope you see you next month or one of the future webinars. Thank you.